Hello and welcome to Coinstruct, the podcast where we look at the world of finance and cryptocurrency from a more human perspective. On today's show, I am joined by George Harrap. He's a bit of a DeFi guy, crypto OG. He's been around in the space for a long time. For the past 10 years, he's been mining Bitcoin, writing theses, writing books, blog posts, creating many projects, and generally just DeFiing. However, today, George joins me as a key member of Step Finance. Step Finance is billed as the front page of Solana. They're currently building a growing ecosystem of products and services that essentially allows you to aggregate everything into one beautiful platform. With Step Finance's recent token launch and the incredible growth that Solana itself is seeing these months, George and the team are very excited, and I am very excited to have him on this show. As always, we will talk many things in this podcast, but none of them should be considered as financial advice. Thank you. Okay, well, hello, George, and welcome to the podcast. I appreciate you coming on.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here.
So I thought the best thing to do would be to start off with an introduction about who you are and kind of what you've been up to in the space. You are currently managing a project, but I'd actually like to ask you about what you've been up to before this current project.
Sure. Yeah. I guess I can start with my crypto journey.
Yes.
It's been almost a decade. Well, no, it has been more than a decade now that I've been glued to cryptocurrencies every single day of my life. I got into crypto probably early 2011. And I was mining Bitcoin. I was a student at the time, just sort of building a mining rig in my room that was also a heater. It's a heater which makes money, right? Which is the best kind of heater.
That is the best kind of heater.
I used to buy like graphics cards off eBay and then just set them up and like daisy chain the PCIe slots and stuff. It was good times. And back then there was only like one exchange. There was one website called bitcoin.org. And that exchange, which some of your viewers might know, was called Mt. Gox in Japan. And you had to wire money to a Japanese bank there which was like a former trading card game website. So like back then, like crypto was nowhere near what it is today, right? So it was just some weird niche thing on the internet, which a couple of people were into. So no, it was good times. And I didn't know anything about finance. So I sort of taught myself everything just through, just learning about Bitcoin, being on the forums there, mining. I was one of the first FPGA miners. I was one of the first ASIC miners. So I was about 1% of the network at some stage.
Wow.
That was pretty cool. People might know Butterfly Labs, who are kind of infamous, but they were one of the first manufacturers of miners. So I flew out to America and had to go and see that this thing was real and legit, and they had my miner and stuff. I took out a loan in Australia, which I couldn't afford because I was a student at the time, but I just got the max, whatever the bank would give me at some insane rate, like 20%, but who cares? Because I thought, hey, I'm going to buy this miner from this Butterfly Labs company. It's going to be great. It was delayed 6 months, but eventually it arrived and it worked out okay. So.
And this was all circa 2010, right? 2011, 2012.
This was 2011 till say 2013, I would say, in all that time period. Just sort of delving into mining, getting stuck into these things. But eventually, I made a bit of money on mining, and in 2014, I decided to leave Australia, go to Hong Kong, and start a company with my co-founder there. We were focused on Bitcoin remittances at the time, first in the world to do that. We also started one of Asia's, the second or third, I think it was third exchange. It was the first with a multi-sig wallet for customer funds. We started an exchange. And back then, like now everyone's an exchange, right? But back then there was like 4. There was a couple of exchanges around the world. So that was about it.
And I assume there was no Gnosis multi-sig or anything, no third-party service for these kinds of things. It was all very rudimentary at this point.
No, so later on in the piece, we were the first integration for BitGo. BitGo, their big call to fame back then was that they were a multi-sig for exchanges. So we're like, yeah, cool. But that sort of came maybe, let's say, 2014, 2015. But, prior to that, There was no multi-sigs or anything, no infrastructure at all, really. It was kind of everyone just rolling their own thing and hoping that it works. And fiat bank accounts as well, like all of these crypto companies, and it's still kind of the case today. Everyone uses proxy companies and different ways to try and get banking access because, yeah, I guess then it was kind of about just spot trading,
Right.
getting fiat in, getting fiat out, stuff like that. But yeah, we started the company in Hong Kong, focused on remittances, built it out to 6, 7 different countries, Southeast Asia, for transferring money. I wrote a book on stablecoins, raised several rounds of funding from all the different levels, angel, VC, corporate. And yeah, sort of eventually it led me to my current journey on DeFi, which is where I've been probably for the last 2 years, just really getting stuck into the ecosystem here. And this year started Step Finance with a couple of friends of mine, who they were friends from way back in the day. So yeah, sort of it's come full circle. But I'm just as excited now about the DeFi world as I was mining in my room, over 10 years ago. So it's a very cool time to be alive.
Yeah, I mean the whole crypto scene in general is just so fast paced, right? And so back in what 2010, 11, when you're mining, back then it's super new and exciting, and the money in crypto generally is pretty good. So that's always like a motivator. But yeah, like every year or every month even, something new comes along that people have been thinking about solving for a while, and then someone just solves it. And alongside all of this like innovation and progress is the hype of money, right? And that is a huge thing driving crypto forward at the moment. But like you say, underneath it all, there's just all kinds of innovation going on. There's all kinds of people just finding out new things to do with this crazy technology, right? I do wonder how sustainable the current growth is and how sustainable the current market prices are. But for someone like yourself, who you would say an incumbent maybe in the space, someone who's actually working and developing and interacting with the technology itself rather than just the trading of cryptocurrencies, I think that there's no real fear of how long that will last. I think that's the just beginning, right?
Yeah, well, money as a thing it's not taught in schools. It's some people might say by design, but it's not taught in schools. People don't know how it works. People use money every day, and they care about these different things in politics every day, or healthcare or education for their kids, or where they live, or the price of food or whatever. Like, they care about all of these things, but at the root of literally everything is money. And yet people have no idea just how does it come into existence? Where does it come from? Where does money come from? Imagine, putting your shoes on in the morning and not knowing where shoes come from, or that they're made and manufactured in a factory. It's kind of like that, right? So I think that crypto is kind of opening the eyes for a lot of people around the world about how money works, the different ways of which money might work, different things which have been walled off, to people, because previously you needed a $50 million banking license to engage in any of the activities, just like in DeFi, like collateralized lending. Well, you've got to be like a Goldman Sachs to do a lot of that stuff, not Joe Blow on the street who's got $50 to his name, So
Yeah.
I think there's just a whole new world of opportunities people are waking up to, and that's not going to stop anytime soon. It's just going to continue to accelerate as this whole crypto ecosystem eats the rest of the financial legacy fi, as I would call it.
TradFi, Boomify. Yes. No, absolutely
Boomify,
agreed.
TradFi, legacy fi.
All of these suits.
Yep.
Yeah, I completely agree. The thing about people changing people's perspectives or letting people understand the monetary system is completely true, and probably one of the best things from my personal experience of being in crypto is kind of finding out more about the financial system. But honestly, what I think it's doing more than anything isn't just educating people, but it's really lifting the veil about how ridiculous the financial system that we've been working with for at least the last 50 years, since the 70s, how ridiculous it's gotten in terms of, monetary creation, random wealth creation, manipulation of markets, basically everyone who knows what they're doing, which is very few, because like you say, intentionally or unintentionally, it's not taught to us at any point in our lifetime unless you choose to learn it. But these guys know how it works. The people who traditionally for the last 50 years have made a lot of money, they can manipulate it. And it's just, when you see people talk about the volatility of crypto or the manipulation of the markets, the thing that makes me laugh is that this has been going on forever. Volatile, manipulated markets have been going on forever, but the only time the regular retail person can see it or benefit from it is in crypto, which is why it gets such a kind of a bad press.
Yeah,
Yeah,
100%.
yeah,
Yeah, and I was going to add maybe quickly to that. Like, I think ultimately this leads us on a path, which I mean, this has always been the case since forever, since I got into crypto. But it ultimately will clash with nation states.
yeah,
Crypto will ultimately piss off governments, and governments, their main control is the money supply. If they don't have the money supply, they have literally nothing. And they want people on their particular patch of dirt to use their money and to have control over that, because that's how they pay for everything. That's how they do everything. So crypto is fine to coexist when it's like 0.2% of your GDP. But when it becomes 5, 10, 15, 50% of your GDP, now you've got a problem. And things happen slowly until they happen fast. So I think what you'll see is that eventually there will be this clash. And some governments will react strongly negatively towards it. They'll see it as a threat. And maybe some will embrace it. Certainly those which have nothing to lose, I think, will embrace it. I've got a lot of thoughts about that as well, certainly from the remittance world and dealing with a lot of developing countries that are sending and receiving money. So I think there will be some which have nothing to lose, and they're like, hey, might as well welcome this new paradigm and all this new money in the world, and hey, why don't you come to our country and do it? But people that have a lot to lose, well, they're going to kind of kick and scream and go down kicking and screaming. So it's going to be an exciting time. We haven't hit that point yet, but it is coming. There will be a time when it is a significant percent of GDP, and it is significantly impacting the ability for the nation state to exist.
yeah. I mean, what if you are a developing nation, or one that's under the cosh of authoritarianism, or for example, sanctions of another country? Why wouldn't you embrace a technology such as cryptocurrency? It just makes so much sense for them to be able to bring any form of power back into their own hands, because globally, the incumbent powers will always, they will just take whatever power the growing countries will have in order to maintain their own power. But if this new thing springs up out of nowhere, from the internet in a decentralized, supposedly decentralized manner, it's a no-brainer really for developing and trodden down nations to try and take hold of this sort of thing. It is, like you say, the nations that have kind of looking to maintain or increase their control on financial systems, that's going to be a really intense narrative over the coming decade or decades. Interesting to see how it goes. But
yeah, 100%.
Yeah, I mean, this kind of like leads me back into something. DeFi is kind of thought of as fringe still because of the small percentage of GDP, because of the small adoption rate, and this general idea of cryptocurrency in general. But DeFi is, as I keep telling my friends, a place that employs so many people and also just so many talented people. Some of the most talented minds in the tech space are in the crypto space, and that it helps that it's a profitable space to be working in. But also, it just shows like the future for DeFi is really strong. You obviously have been working in crypto, in mining, building exchanges, and now DeFi. Like, do you think that DeFi is a professional space to be working in at this point? Is it able to absorb TradFi boomer hopefuls, because it's like there's an actual professional future to working in DeFi?
Yeah, well, one thing I've always had a problem with, living in Hong Kong is a financial hub, much like London, Singapore, New York. It's basically the financial hubs of the world. And you have a lot of these banks there, and you have a lot of people who call themselves banker. What does that mean? It's not a verb. You can't sit there and bank for me, please. It's not like running. It's not something which you can do. So what does the word banker mean? Well, it kind of means that you're someone who sits behind a desk there, and then like banks do a bunch of things, but a lot of that is redundant. You have a lot of people that are sort of shuffling paper and words around for no real economic or benefit at all. It's often just because of some weird reason that the bank has, like that you have to have a certain document for a loan or something like that, and a whole 10 people have to go and process that. So I would say that DeFi is not going to absorb these people. These people are going to be out of work, and they're going to have to look for another type of job, because DeFi is 100 times more, maybe 1,000 times more efficient. You have things like Uniswap or SushiSwap or something. They are a small team of maybe 10 people, maybe 15. Started off as just a couple of people on the internet, and they do more volume than most countries' national stock exchanges. Or they custody more assets than many of these different countries' banks that they might have in their jurisdiction. So they will do all of that without the need of having all of these humans sitting behind a desk 9 to 5, going home on a weekend, having a day off on a bank holiday. They're working 24/7, these protocols, and you don't need any of that, and everything is transparent. So yeah, I don't think there is really a future for the profession of, say, banking, whatever that means. I think things are going to have to adapt, and people are going to have to embrace a new reality that we don't have to trust a random people, in suits that sit around a table and decide what to do with your money or not. You can just go to a website, everything's clear, it's on the blockchain, you can see it all, the money's there, and that's sort of how we're going to have to adapt to things.
Yeah, I think that's a great future. I mean, so it kind of brings you back to, the efficiency point is a really, really important one. You were saying about Bitcoin mining at the start. Bitcoin mining has recently, just this weekend, come under pretty intense fire for its environmental efficiency. And I've seen lots of kind of documents and entire reports that purport that Bitcoin mining is more efficient or less inefficient than people think, especially when compared to the banking industry and the gold mining industry. I do personally have quite a few reservations about Bitcoin BTC and how as it served itself a really useful purpose leading up to now, but I do think that at a certain point, with the emissions rate continuing to go down and Bitcoin continuing to really not show so much of a use case, I don't personally see how it's like the most justifiable thing. But I do think though that the environmental question around cryptocurrencies and particularly Bitcoin is one that's probably going to be a narrative of the next 10 years as well. Do you what do you think about Bitcoin mining in general? Do you think it's an environmentally challenging, environmentally controversial thing?
It's funny that this topic has come up. I mean, I wrote a blog post on this like 5 years ago or something, when it was a topic there, and then it just died off, and now it's resurfaced again because people want something to complain about.
But fashion,
I think, the thing is, Bitcoin mining, environmental impact, okay, compared with what? So would you say that a respirator in a hospital is a waste of energy? Most people would say, no, it's not, because it's doing something useful and it's saving people. Yeah, cool, I'd agree. Okay, what about burning excess gas in a gas field somewhere? People would probably say, that's probably like, I think it's called offluent or gas, or whatever it is, when they're burning additional energy for the reason of they don't want to store that energy, so they just burn it off.
Is this when they burn it off from the oil fields?
Yeah, the oil fields, the fracking fields, and so on.
Yeah, they say that this burn off is to massively reduce the methane that gets put out, and instead puts out CO2. But yeah,
right. So there's a reason. People might say, oh, that's not a good use of energy. You should capture or do something with it, right? So you have a spectrum of a hospital that is a productive use of energy, and then you have people sort of just burning things because they want to as one scale. So then you go, okay, where does Bitcoin fit on that scale? Or where does cryptocurrency fit on that scale of useful to not useful uses of energy? And you have to go, well, what is Bitcoin doing? Bitcoin is the argument, which I like, is that Bitcoin is securing a ledger which is tamper-proof, and that's never really existed in the history of the universe before. We've never really had the ability to communicate and write things down and share things with each other that is tamper-proof or
immutable, right?
Immutable, right? So now it remains to be seen if Bitcoin will remain that way. I think most human inventions, because there is a human element, there will always be something, but I think it's the best shot that we've had in a while. So I would say that is a very useful and productive use of energy when you compare it with, say, the banking system, who you go to Hong Kong, they all have their lights on at 9 p.m. at night when nobody's in the building. That's everywhere in the world. All of these different banks that have offices in every country of the world. Why are they doing that? Is anybody asking them why they do that? What about running their air conditioning when nobody's in there? All these different things, right? There's lots of different uses of energy which we would say are unproductive. But I would say that Bitcoin mining is many magnitudes more productive than many other things in the world. And for that reason, I would say that this kind of environmental stuff is it's just a non-question, really. Are there better, more efficient ways to secure ledgers and do these things? Absolutely. I think there are many different consensus mechanisms. I don't think proof of work is the best thing ever. People will argue that in order to secure a network, you need to have things which are not reliant on just the network itself. They need to come from the outside world. So, for example, proof of stake relies on people having coins in the network. So it's like isolated to like the ability for you to have coins. Whereas proof of work requires like physical hardware, which comes from outside the system. You need to go to TSMC in Taiwan, and they need to go and put silicon on a chip and give it to you and ship it to you. So anyway, there's like additional barriers there, which people say, can help security. But I would just sort of wrap up with, Bitcoin is providing a productive use by securing information, which has never really happened before in the world. And it certainly pioneered the way. Is it the best use of energy? No. Are there better uses of energy? Yes. Can you have ledgers which do the same thing but in a more efficient manner? Yes. Should we all be using them? I don't know, maybe. So yeah, I think that's kind of where I sit on the
No, I think what you said at the end about Bitcoin being the pioneer, I think for me that's the crux of it, right? Is that the system that Bitcoin is being mined to use, Bitcoin BTC, is the legacy system, right? It's the first biggest, it's the one that's why it's at the top of the market cap table, is because it is the legacy system. But as we know, legacy systems get outplaced and outpaced by better, higher functioning technology. Like, for example, Bitcoin BTC is slow, expensive, and costs a lot of, electricity, a lot of power to run. But like you said, there's more DLT, distributed ledger technologies coming about that are more efficient, and they will be adopted in the future. Whether or not that means at the expense of BTC is yet to be seen. But yeah, there's no world in which the efficiency of the system doesn't improve, and it will probably improve exponentially, right? One thing that's important is that a lot of people may not realize is that Bitcoin itself is actually the idea, right? The Bitcoin white paper was published by Satoshi Nakamoto, and the idea of Bitcoin is more so BTC is an implementation of the idea of Bitcoin, right? And there's a few other Bitcoin implementations. I think there's 3 others. There's Bitcoin Cash, Bitcoin SV, and I think one more, which I forget. These are all taking the concept of Bitcoin, but slightly different and also much more efficient. So yeah, Bitcoin BTC mining, it's a tough one. I see it being replaced at some point, but at least for the foreseeable year, it's got some use. Just to clarify, proof of work, it's in the name about why energy consumption is required, right? Proof of work must be done. Work requires energy, right? So that's a kind of an important caveat for that. So speaking of somewhat archaic, I don't want to be rude, but somewhat archaic blockchains, moving on to kind of the new DeFi landscape, the new blockchains that are trying to push things forward. The project you have launched, Step Finance, is on the Solana blockchain. I'd like to actually ask you to precursor, kind of give an Eli 5 on what the Solana blockchain is, and kind of compare it to Ethereum if you can.
Sure. So I guess where we're at with DeFi currently is that for the last 2 years, I could say for the last year and a half at least, it's been pioneered by Ethereum for sure. All of the projects have been on Ethereum. They've started on Ethereum. They have a big developer space there, and there's a lot of things happening there. But what we've seen is that certainly the scalability of Ethereum, a common theme in crypto land is scalability and fees and cost. As the Ethereum price has gone up so much,
let's just clarify how much it's gone up, because when I first started properly trading DeFi back in September, August, I was paying maybe, for a simple swap on Uniswap, I was paying maybe $2 or $3 max. The other day, I
Yep.
tried to do a swap and it was $185. And this wasn't even at the highest time. I saw higher Gwei times and didn't bother checking the price. But that's a 100 times increase in less than 5 months.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's insane. Not only is the network itself congested, but then you have the price of the actual coin appreciating. So, even if the quoted Gwei prices in Ethereum go down, well, if the actual dollar price of those coins go up, it's still not really a viable proposition for anybody new coming in. Like you can imagine, I think both of us have friends or people that are talking to us and they want to get in and they want to go and buy a coin. Maybe they want to go and try this out. And then you tell them, oh, it's $185, by the way, to do a transaction. Yeah, and maybe that won't get included. Maybe it will fail. And you also have to do a $75 approval transaction before that. Most people would go, no way. I've got $200.
That's what it is. They're trying to put $200 into a coin that might go up, and I'm like, well, you're going to have to spend all of that first on fees,
Yeah.
and then deal with the volatility of the token you buy, anyways. Like, it is a tough sell.
Exactly right. So these are the current problems in DeFi and Ethereum land, and that's why we've seen, I would say, a flourishing of alternative DeFi blockchains. And I would say that DeFi itself is bigger than just Ethereum. It is a concept of decentralizing finance, and that doesn't necessitate the use of one blockchain over another. It just means that you need to decentralize finance. So you first saw the growth of Binance Chain and BSC. Because it is compatible with the Ethereum EVM implementation, a lot of projects could basically copy paste code and get it set up on Binance. Now, Binance, there's questions of centralization and so on and blah, blah, blah. But whatever, the point is that the BSC chain grew a lot, attracted billions in TVL.
Well, I think the growth of BSC was actually a bit of an eye opener to see how much the market actually cares about true decentralization. I mean, decentralization is a bit of a meme in crypto, and it's a valid meme, and it's the one that should be the central focus of most of the operations. But I mean, BSC literally copy pasted a testnet of Ethereum, ran off of 20 Binance owned servers, and it's clearly centralized, clearly under the control of one massive company. And yeah, like you say, the growth was exponential. People didn't give a damn, and it's just kind of interesting to see.
Yeah, exactly. And people just wanted to use the products. They didn't really care about the chain. So I think, talk about eye-opening. Like maybe that's one thing where the app layer is so much more valuable than the protocol layer. That could be one way to interpret that. But we saw BSC grow. And then sort of, I guess that's something that's really happened, I think, the start of this year, 2021, has been the growth of Solana, which I think is a much better alternative to what's happening on BSC and Ethereum. So Solana is another blockchain. It's been around for a couple of years, but it's only really hitting its stride recently. It's had some prominent backers, I guess you would call them, with Alameda and FTX, looking to essentially decentralize the stuff which they're currently, they run a centralized exchange, FTX.com.
Mm-hmm.
And, Sam has said before, that could just be on a blockchain. There's no reason that it needs to exist with all this overhead. And as someone who's built 6 exchanges, I can tell you that there is a massive overhead for running a centralized exchange. It is really annoying. And it is just tough to manage. And when you're in the DeFi world, you can outsource all of that to the actual blockchain, and the blockchain is your back end, and you just build a pretty front end, a thing for people to interact with. So Solana's come up a lot this year. There's been several hackathons. TVL is increasing. It's over a couple of billion now, I think. And from our perspective at Step, we actually started with a DCA project on Ethereum, DCA, dollar cost averaging, a place where you can put money in and then it will go and buy a coin for you at some set schedule, right? Pretty simple. But that's a concept we came up with last year where it was like, hey, this is probably missing in the DeFi world. Can we do this? The problem is that, sure, you can do it. But back then, Ethereum at 1,500, the price with only 6 users was going to be $180 per transaction.
Whoa.
And that was at 50 Gwei.
Whoa.
So have F at 4,000 and Gwei at 300, you can see that it's completely unviable. We tried side chains as well. We tried Matic, now Polygon and XDAI. They didn't have any liquidity for the coins which we wanted, so we'd still have to make the trip across to Ethereum. So essentially, we were looking around. We're like, hey, Solana has all of these coins that are on Ethereum in their wrapped versions. There's tons of liquidity. There's a DEX. The market maker is Alameda, the biggest fund in the world for crypto. Why don't we build our project there? So we got into the hackathon. We built it out. It was a great, first step, I guess, for us back then.
First step.
But what we, yep, puns intended. We eventually thought that, just being like a DCA platform, we're kind of like just another project out there that's like, hey, use my product. It's cool. Because then you only appeal for people that are looking for that specific thing. So
Sure.
we thought, actually what Solana needs is this one place that brings together all of the projects in one central dashboard. You can manage your portfolio, you can execute transactions across different products, you can do a bunch of stuff, but it's all in one place. That gets a lot more eyes on. And actually, we love the idea of being that place that people use every day. So like the CoinGeckos of the world, people use their MetaMask every day. These are the kind of products which I think are highly valuable, and that's the space that we want to be in. So that's what Step Finance is all about. Portfolio manager, transaction aggregator for Solana, bring everything together in one place. And that's currently where we're at with things and the journey that got there.
Yeah, awesome. Will we see the DCA trader on Step?
At some stage, yeah. We still have the contract. Like, it's sitting there. We made it for that hackathon. Like, it works. It's just that we're going to do a couple of other things before we get to the different sort of investment contracts where people can go and put their money in and we have essential custody of the funds and so on. So at the moment, we're just kind of keeping it light touch to get coverage of the ecosystem. But yeah, we're slowly moving towards, there will be vaults, there will be things like the DCA.
Oh, fantastic.
And it's going to be awesome.
Yeah, awesome. I mean, DCA is something that I personally am not particularly well versed in because I'm an ape, but a lot of my friends will always use DCA. They will always tell me, you should be doing this, you should be doing this. So I think certainly it's a hugely popular sort of feature. Like we said about pretty front ends built on the back end of the blockchain, Step Finance is actually a very, very pretty front end. It seems to be actually all of Solana is made by people who know how to make a pretty front end. Everything just looks very sleek. The Solana blockchain itself is incredibly quick, like lightning quick, super low transaction fees. It's actually just, like you said, there's a pretty small community of very focused builders on Solana. And I think that it's important to make the distinction, though, that this is probably because it requires an entirely separate coding language, and it's called Rust. Whereas on Ethereum and Ethereum sidechains such as BSC or L2 such as Polygon Matic, XDAI, you can use Solidity, which is the Ethereum coding language, and they are all compatible with each other, as you said, EVM compatible. So it's just quite an interesting thing to see, because obviously the DeFi system is set up in Solidity, right? The majority of people who are very talented are talented in Solidity. So for me, that was always a concern about Solana, was, are people going to make that hop over to coding in Rust and in order to function on the Solana blockchain? When you were forming your team, was that a barrier that you came up against?
Yeah, so I think Rust is it's a good filter for quality. So what you've seen on the Solidity things is, certainly with BSC, you had just a bunch of copy pastes that were food farms, and people were like, well, I guess we're the first to make a food farm on this chain. Boom, we're going to make one. And then they disappear a couple of weeks later when the APIs drop and the token disappears. So I think on Solana, you actually have to put some thought into it. And because there is this barrier to entry, you don't get people that are just like copy pasting. The latest hackathon that's currently underway at the time of us doing this call is, it's got 10,000 builders, 10,000 people signed up
Wow.
that are building on it. So that there is this latent sort of Rust ecosystem that's growing. It's still very small, but Rust as a language, I think, is certainly, like, Rust is not blockchain specific, by the way. Solidity is. So Rust is a little bit bigger than just Solana. So that's one core thing. And secondly, people that come from C++, one of the most used programming languages in the world, Rust is sort of the evolution of that. So our team, our co-founder, Aaron Zero V, he's like 15 years C++ programmer. So he's a god in that. And when he came to Solana, the transition was there is a transition there, but it was easy to pick up. So I think, if people are talented in C++, then they fit in, very well to the Solana ecosystem. And I know a lot of the recruiters out there recruiting for all of these teams, and we are engaging a recruiter, and they're looking to source C++ talent. So that is a very deep pool of people around the world.
For sure, yeah, that's something I'd never known, and that's, I mean, okay, so look, no financial advice, but there's a large amount of incredibly bullish cases for Solana, and for me, the one thing that I think is super bullish about Solana is just how CeFi, TradFi, boomer facing the entire project is. So FTX, as you said, is owned by Sam Alameda, or the Alameda research team, and sorry, mispronounced his name. And that is directly in the faces of the TradFi boomers. They have the is it the Austin Stadium? Is it Austin?
I think it's Miami.
Miami. Oh, okay, sure.
Yeah.
So they have the Miami Stadium, which is now the FTX Stadium. Sam has been on Forbes 30 under 30. He's all over the news in America. And so, I think that there's a huge appeal to the TradFi boomers situation, and of course, C++ people, not calling C++'s suits, but there is a larger, certainly, the generation above or two generations above who have been skilled in C++. So that's really interesting that there's that kind of, that really probably beneficial to Solana onboarding system for new Rust developers.
Yeah, and just to quickly, Solana itself, the compiler itself can compile C++ as well. So you can literally build stuff in C++. The problem is that there's not much documentation. So that's the kind of thing, right? So most people just start with Rust and just go from there anyway, because that's where all the documentation is. But technically, we initially set out trying to build stuff on C++ on Solana. So it is possible. It just needs a little bit more docs.
Interesting. That is really interesting, that C++ thing, because I always just assumed that was probably a barrier for Solana. But as you say, it's compatible with C++ engineers. That could change my mind completely. Interesting. So you formed your team. You've come up with the idea of Step. What's the next step? Forget the pun. What's the next step for Step Finance? You've got the team. You've got everything ready. You've built the platform. So you're then going to, like you say, you want to make a daily use project such as CoinGecko, MetaMask. Those two, however, do not have a token. Step Finance does have a token, the Step token. So how do you lead up to that launch?
Yep. Yeah, so we have kind of a manifesto, I guess you'd call it, of sorts, that kind of consists between the docs.step.finance with our tokenomics there, and also some tweet threads from myself. But the long and the short of it is that if you want to be that place that attracts attention, you've got to be able to build a moat. You've got to be able to build useful things which people want to use and potentially pay for. The saying goes, if everything is free, then you're the product. So I think, what we want to do is on Step, it starts off being this place where, okay, we can visualize what's happening on the Solana ecosystem, right? A bunch of integrations, portfolio management stuff, front end to do that, maybe some swaps, which we have currently. But okay, that's sort of the base layer for what we're doing at Step. The next sort of phase that we're going into is, well, we've just launched the Step token. And the purpose of that is that's a way for people to share in the value accrual of Step as a platform. So if we didn't have that, Step would just be another thing which maybe you use, maybe you don't care about, maybe you don't pay a fee, maybe it's all free, something like that, right? Mm-hmm. Whereas if we actually have a token, we have a responsibility to build sort of higher level, better value adding things for people. So it might be transaction aggregation across multiple different pools. It might be various yield farming strategies, maybe auto compounding strategies. It might be bridges that we're running. There's a lot of different things which can accrue value, and it's best to accrue that value in something that people can essentially get a share of, right? And that's sort of what the token is the token is kind of a way for people to invest in the future development of Step. So at start now, we're at the base case, and then we're going to the value accrual phase. That will start with a lot of these different things which people pay fees for. So the swap aggregation is one, kind of like a 1inch. 1inch is really cool on Ethereum, where you have all of these pools of money, and like they swap across all of them if you want to do like a particular you want to buy a particular coin, because maybe Uniswap's not the best price, maybe SushiSwap is not, maybe it's actually a combination of 10 things is the best price.
Sure.
So we're doing something like that, for Solana. That's in our documents. And also, like you said, the DCA, that's another value add. We can charge a fee for that. Yield farming, auto compounding, that's another value add. We can charge a fee for that. Bridges, we've talked to some of the different people that are building bridges. We'd love to integrate that, probably charge a fee for that as well. So there's a lot of these different things there which we're going to add to Step. So it's a lot more than just a dashboard to visualize stuff. It's more, it also includes a lot of these features which, to be honest, like certainly for many new people to the system, like they are not having 20 tabs open like probably we are.
Yes.
And like switching between this thing and that thing and and doing it all manually. People just want one place to do things and press buttons and just everything works. So that's kind of what we're going for. That's the kind of market. Is like, look, if you want to have 20 tabs open and go to different people and like try and manage these different things, great, all power to you. But most people don't. So Step kind of fits in that role where we bring everything together in one place and people can press buttons on Step, they can pay a fee, and it does productive, useful things for them.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the value proposition for Step is really, really huge, but especially so because it is so early in the Solana ecosystem, like life cycle, right? There isn't that many people who are doing the things you just spoke about individually, let alone someone who's aggregating all of those services together. Like Solana is still early stage. I mean, relatively early stage. So for anyone who's interested in Step, again, no financial advice, there is also a fantastic kind of liquidity mining operation going on Radium.io, which is the principal DEX for Solana at the moment. So I wonder, like, that was actually a huge part of the token launch's hype, right, George? Was the liquidity mining incentives. So this is something that a lot of projects, just a quick Eli 5, a lot of projects do this, whereby you can provide liquidity in the native token and a secondary backing token such as USDC or blah blah, and then you can deposit this liquidity token, this liquidity pool token, and receive, for example, in this case, Step as a high APY reward for providing liquidity. It's a bit of a staple in DeFi at the moment. And George, do you see any negatives for high APY liquidity mining at the beginning? What do you see as the reason for that? Obviously, you guys implemented it, so.
Yeah, so I guess Step recently launched. It's been the largest launch on Solana to date. We had 26,000 active connections at the time of launch. We had the biggest liquidity pool, up to 200 million. It's still pretty much one of the biggest liquidity pools, I think.
I think it's the second biggest now,
on
yeah.
Solana. Yep. So yeah, it's Step is central to everything that is happening right now in Solana. But I guess the question goes back to tokenomics models and how they work. The thing is that when a team makes a token, some teams. So firstly, I'll say this as well. A lot of people tried to tell us what to do on how to launch, and these, like, we've been in it a while. We kind of know what we're going to do, and we don't want to listen to somebody else to tell us what to do. So you had a lot of people that were like, oh, you need to launch in a specific way, and you need to have these limits, and then you need to have a whitelist, and the whitelist can be like, oh, everyone picks a random number, and then the people randomly get selected, and people have all of these convoluted mechanisms, like 10 different mechanisms. Why? Well, they try and use this word fairness. And what does fairness even mean? Limiting people and having everyone in a lottery or just joining a Discord, that's not fair. Or what if I don't what if I don't choose the lucky number? Well, maybe I'm, willing and able to contribute to the project, but you're not going to give me any coins just because I didn't choose the lucky number that was random. Like, that doesn't sound very fair. Yet some people think that creates fairness. Or what if we put a cap on the amount that you can buy? So then you just get like 10,000 addresses from people that are trying to game the system. And okay, you can't buy everything on one address. I'll go and make 10,000, and then I can reach the limit. So, if your solution doesn't actually approach fairness, or you don't know what that means, then it's not going to work. So essentially, our take on fairness is the fairest system is no system. Sure. You need to just have the ability to buy a coin, and then that's it. If you want to buy it, great. If you don't have to. and just leave it up to the market, and the market will find the price. So, with our system, like the high APY, as you mentioned, high APYs are just a function of the price of the token, the size of the liquidity pool. Essentially that calculation. So nobody goes out, I guess, to go, well, I'm targeting a 5,000% APY. It kind of happens that way. There's certainly things you can do, but our tokenomics, there was quite a bit more thought to it than that. Essentially the idea is that a couple of principles. When I design tokenomics documents, I like to start with principles first. Principles, number one, early adopters should be rewarded. People that take the most risk early on, it is reasonable for them to be rewarded. So that's the first thing.
I think that's a very, very sound, very, very sound principle. One that I think did play out pretty well in the step launch, from what I could see.
Yeah, 100%, 100%. And so I guess another sort of section as well would be that we don't want to limit anyone. Everyone should be free to transact however much they want. And you can buy $20, you can buy $2 million if you want. It's up to you, and the price will be according to whatever you want to pay. So just leave it up to the market. I guess some other principles are that you want to start with a bang, and if you sort of start with a whimper, it's very hard for you to gain traction later on. Mm-hmm. If you start with a bang, you get a lot of eyes on the project, a lot of interest, and then you can build on that for later growth. So you start with a lot of interest and with a bang, with a high APY, with a free market where anyone can go and buy the coin. And let's say the price goes down over time because there's a lot of new inflation, there's a lot of new coins that are coming into the system. So it makes sense that the price is not going to stay high forever. Things don't always go up. Sometimes things go down. But you want to have that momentum for powering your medium-term growth. And your medium-term growth is kind of like, if we say early growth is maybe 1 to 3 months, I would say medium-term is like, say, 3 to 9 months or 3 to 12 months in. Sure. That's where you are past the initial phases of seeding the markets, of introducing new people to the platform, and now you're just building stuff, and you're building value accruing things, and you've got all of these people who have been involved in your project who have come in the door and are interested in it, and they're all sitting there. They're using Step every day, and B, they're like, when's this coming? So mm-hmm. It gives you good feedback and good interest to build the stuff you need. And that powers your long-term growth 12 months onwards, whereby now you have the value accrual things in place. Now you have the different things which can add value to the Step token. And now it's not just about farming it. It's about actually value accruing to the native token. Farming was just a way of distribution, of rewarding the early adopters. But really the long-term growth, it's about revenue and generating money for the protocol from people using products and paying for those products.
Yeah, I think one of the key things about your launch was that you, like you said, you wanted to start with a bang and then move on with that kind of momentum. But for something like Step, which really is supposed to be a mass adopted, if everyone uses it, then it functions incredibly well. That's kind of essential for the the value proposition of Step as a token is everyone knows about it, so everyone uses it, so there's lots of value accrual to the Step token. So it's a pretty harmonious kind of thing. One thing you did say, about the lots of eyes on a launch. Personally, I was aware of the launch and I was kind of somewhat involved in it, but I've never seen so many butthurt people. Can I use the word butthurt? I've never seen so many butthurt people who, I don't know, say they bought at the wrong time, they didn't commit enough to liquidity, they didn't gain what they wanted, or I don't know what their problem was, but everything was very clear and open on the Step launch. Like I wasn't left wanting information. I felt there was no deviances about, but there was a lot of very strong kind of people were worried about basically the FDV, the fully diluted valuation. I think that's something that people were getting hung up on. And it's something that people are getting hung up on a lot on the Solana ecosystem. The FDV, as a quick Eli 5, is the fully diluted valuation, which means that the total market cap, if all of the circulating supply of a token is circulating. For example, Step beginning was a very maybe 1 million or 2 million circulating supply and has slowly increased as the emissions go up. Solana is a very new ecosystem, so many projects are looking for the long term and so therefore have large supplies, large holdings of tokens that are not released. So I think this FDV argument was a bit of a naff one. What do you think fueled that kind of butthurt behavior, if I can use that word?
I think it's people that have never used DeFi before, that didn't understand the mechanics of how things work. I mean, a lot of people, I wrote a blog post on this called The 5 Stages of Entitlement. And it was, a lot of it was, why didn't I get to buy first at the first launch? Oh, somebody else did. Well, that's not fair, because somebody else did, not me. So it comes back to three people, me, myself, and I. That's what I write in that blog post, and that is not the way to run things. It is open. If somebody beats you to the punch of buying at the best price, well, maybe you should have been quicker. That's our philosophy on things. We have a very clear philosophy at Step about these things, and a lot of projects, like, they try and micromanage the price, and they try and micromanage things. It's not our job to micromanage price. We're developing a platform. If people are micromanaging price, it means that they have no confidence in what they're building.
Sure.
So another thing that I would say is, like, if you're hung up on people selling your coin, and some projects they put limits, or you can't buy or sell it or do whatever. It's like, well, maybe a project's not too good anyway. If you're so scared of people selling it, why don't you just focus on building the best thing ever? And if you build the best thing ever, the price will follow that, and the price will be reflective of that. So, yeah, I would say that, look, FTVs is another thing that, well, we didn't set the FTV. The market set the FTV. If you don't like the price of something, don't buy it. Like, if you think the FTV is too high, don't buy it. We have the ability to short the token as well on FTX. If you are so inclined to think that it's not a good deal, well, put your money where your mouth is. You can go and short it, and you can see how that turns out. Maybe you make some money. So yeah, fundamentally, we don't really care about these supposed arguments of FTV, because that is, there's lots of other projects out there. Serum has a 50 billion FTV.
Yeah.
If you don't like Serum, then you shouldn't use it. So yeah, it's kind of a nonsensical argument, I think. And it comes back to my blog post of the 5 stages of entitlement. But it's very happy with the launch. I think it went really well. We've received a lot of good feedback from everyone, and I think it kind of set the precedent for how things work on Solana. And you've seen other launches that have tried to micromanage things, and they've kind of just sort of flopped since. They never sort of achieved the stuff which Step has. So things will change, and Solana will continue to grow, but we're very happy with how things went in the launch.
Yeah, for me personally, it was one of the most successful launches I've been involved in. Like you said about the micromanaging, or just in any kind of complex system in the name of fairness, a lot of what actually happens is you present these barriers to entry that a lot of the regular people who would have otherwise tried to invest don't really feel comfortable interacting with, like whitelisting, or, just basically any kind of extra steps in the name of fairness does in many ways actually make it less fair. So I do agree with you that maybe just the most vanilla launch it people can buy is probably just the fairest way to deal with it.
It was Confucius that said the big inequality is to try and make unequal things equal, because essentially you have to take a hammer to some people and you have to say, no, you can't do that, and you have to hammer them down, you have to limit them, you have to stop them doing things, stop their freedom of the ability to transact or to do whatever they want. And that is a fundamental unfair. If you need to hammer people down, well, that doesn't sound very fair.
Is the Confucius quote in your blog post? I hope it is.
It is.
It is. Okay, good. I'll post a link to that underneath the episode. So most of the hype and most of really the conversation that I was a part of and I saw for Step was largely I saw a few articles, but was largely on Twitter, right? And this is actually a huge point, especially for anyone who's thinking of finding out more about DeFi and wants to know, where on earth to find any and all of this information. Is, I would say, probably currently the best place to go would be to find the correct people to follow on Twitter and to just like scroll through the timeline occasionally. This is kind of an important point though, is when huge, like, entire markets are dictated by certain tweets. Like, for example, the market fell 40%. Ethereum fell like nearly 40% yesterday based on a series of FUD, and some of them legislative and some of them were just tweets from Elon Musk, for example. How does the DeFi media landscape need to change in order for it to become much more mass adopted? Does it have to, I don't want to say the word mature because it doesn't feel like it's immature, but do you understand what I'm trying to say? Whereby, there is
Yeah.
like for Forbes or trading investing or whatever, there's so many regular circulars that go around, and you hear on the roundups in the news, the Google stocks are up 2 points today, and the dollar versus the pound is this kind of thing. There's an established formal media landscape for these things. Is that something that DeFi needs?
That's a good question. I don't think it is. And I think the media is going to have to adjust to how things work. Because fundamentally, that works when you have companies, existing structures, 9 to 5 business work days, these sorts of things in place. And that doesn't exist in DeFi. Like, you can have some random thing launch that's made by an anonymous team in Vladivostok or, Namibia. Like, it doesn't matter where it is in the world. It can just appear on the internet, and then it just starts and it does stuff. So there is no sort of format that I guess you can try and fit a lot of these things in. I guess the information, though, and sort of the discussion on DeFi perhaps can be improved. So I guess if DeFi itself can't be controlled or contained, then I guess maybe the discussion can be in a way that makes sense to people from the outside world. So at the moment, you have a bunch of just like random frogs on Twitter that are doing
Right,
things,
like
and that's
really just
source of
random, super
information.
memey, everything super memey. Like
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, everything is super meme, and there's kind of like a clique of people that understand what they're talking about. Like, if you showed people some of the memes from outside that have no idea what they're trying to get at, so there is maybe some assumed knowledge. I do think that the media probably needs to do a better job of wanting to engage with anonymous teams and anonymous sources. I get the whole idea of the media, and one of the core tenets of it is that, well, if you start taking quotes from anonymous sources, then anybody can make up anything, right? And then that kind of reduces the quality of journalism. I guess the difference is perhaps that an anonymous team member is actually a real entity. You might not know their name, but if their name is Froglord123, then that is the one which is making a comment, and they have a history behind them. They have existing posts, they have existing reputation, they have maybe tens of thousands of followers. So just because you don't know their actual name in the real world, I don't think that matters, because if I told a media my name was Joe Blogs, does that really change the veracity of my argument? Well, really, it comes down to the reputational risk for me as Joe Blogs. So if Froglord123, if they say something dumb or incorrect, well, they have the reputational risk themselves. So yeah, media could probably focus on taking a lot of these anonymous teams. That's just how things are done. And if you're not engaging with them, you're not reporting the news. So if you want to report the news, you need to engage. And I think that's probably a good way to think about it.
That's very interesting. Yeah, it's maybe not just a choice that DeFi needs to make in terms of formalizing, but also it's a choice that the regular journalism needs to make in adapting themselves. It does kind of lead me to think that anonymous teams, anonymous profiles, they can say truth, they can say lies. Look, the journalistic landscape at the moment, especially in terms of like factual reporting, in terms of politics and finance, is so bereft of truth anyways, that I can't imagine that quoting a few anonymous figures would do anything to the quality of the truth in the reporting.
Probably improve it.
Do you know what I mean? Like, at a certain point, when you've got no face there, you can actually be a bit more straight up with your words. And at the moment, journalistic landscape does tend to less be about discourse and ideas and more about identity. And yeah, if you have an anonymous identity, then that solves a lot of problems, because you could be a black person, a brown person, a white person, a man, a woman, someone from anywhere over the world, and your opinion is actually just your opinion, because no one knows who Frogman or Froglord123 is. So it's not like, oh, he said this from this angle. It's like, no, he said this because this is his ideas. And I think that's actually a really powerful thing that a lot of media isn't really picking up on, is that identity politics do get removed largely when it comes from teams such as these, which I think is super interesting. Now,
Yep.
I've got to leave very shortly, but I want to ask you, because it's something I've spoken to you about before, and I think it's super fun. So who is Suju, and why is this a duper cycle?
Stu is He is the co-founder of Three Arrows Capital in Singapore, and he coined the term super cycle. Essentially it's a super cycle, and it means that we could be entering a period in crypto where, because of the incessant money printing, the incompetence of governments all over the world, they're not run by intelligent people, these governments. They're run by probably very unintelligent people in almost all circumstances. So you're probably going to get a proliferation of bad decisions. And this is going to mean that, people that want to preserve their wealth or, invest in things or get involved in the money markets without having to be reliant on their local fiat currency, they're probably going to increase their exposure to crypto, which is just going to drive this trend of crypto growing in market cap, growing in market share, more people using it, more users, and just continuously growing. So I do get that argument. It comes kind of back to where we started the episode, a bit full circle, whereby there could be a point where you get to 20%, 30%, 40% of GDP of a country that is dependent on crypto, and then now the state can't actually tax anyone because they can't get people's money in crypto, not your keys, not your coins. They can't reach in and force people to do it. So you reach an inflection point, and you have to basically join them or fail. I think that could be one way to look at the super cycle, is that we could be entering a period where crypto just continues to grow in every metric, and that'll be good for pricing and good for people that are involved.
Yeah, totally. Good for innovation too, because of course, salaries drive hard work.
100%.
One thing that I do get concerned about somewhat is as the super cycle, the bull run, or whatever you want to say we're in, as things continue, more and more people are belling up my telephone, and just in general, people are just really interested to talk about crypto. I recently moved back from China to the UK, and I went to the pub for the first time in over a year, and I heard so many different groups of people talking about crypto. Like, it was insane. I felt like it was the biggest top signal ever, and then 3 days later we have a huge market crash. So maybe it is the end. Who knows? But
maybe it was.
Yeah, maybe it was, right? But the thing that does concern me is that lots of new people coming into the space, asking me, I want to put £200 on this, £200 on that. There's a lot of volatility about. So what is a good piece of advice for you? Can you think to give to like a new retail investor who's thinking about getting into crypto for the first time?
Yeah, I mean, what I tell people is make use of the stablecoin yield farms. That's one way to make a good, really good gains. We're talking like 50%, maybe 100% yield on some of these things. You put $100, wait a year, it'll be $200. Like, you're never going to get that elsewhere in the market, and it's a pretty low risk bet. So instead of like trying to pick which coin or which random protocol is going to be best, like, I would say just stick to some of the basic stablecoin yield farms, put money in there, get to understand how the system works. Maybe, try out some other stuff here and there. But yeah, if you want to invest and you're not too sure how this thing works, then that will be a low risk but high reward kind of bet to make.
Yeah, and so typically yield farming on Ethereum, as we spoke about, is extortionate and unusably expensive. So a good place to start your yield farming venture would probably be Step Finance on Solana, right?
There you go. Absolutely, yeah.
Nice.
Step, there's plenty of yield farms. Radium as well. We integrate with them on Step. So yeah, a lot of cool stuff, a lot of opportunities.
Nice. Well, I've got to go, so I'm just going to end this call here. But I really appreciate your time, George. It was really interesting talking to you, especially from someone who's got, a lot of experience from the very beginning. It's super interesting.
Thanks so much. Thanks for having me. It's been great.
Cheers, bro.
Cheers.